Being a people leader in a corporate role is very different than what I expected. And so today I want to sit down as if you and I are best friends, and I want to tell you I'm going to tell you all of the dirt that no one else will about what these leadership roles are really like. Also, if you hear a buzzing, it's because my lawn guys are here, and I have moved to like every room in the house, and it doesn't get any quieter. And they're about to actually drive by right now, so. I can't escape it. This is probably going to be a bit of a longer video, so we're going to settle in with coffee and a snack and do our thing. And I'm going to go get some coffee just to escape all of this noise, so come on. Also, if you're new here, my name is Nikki. I make content all about how to make your life better and easier as you move up in your career, especially as your finances and available resources change. So one thing that I wish anyone coming into a leadership role would understand is that these roles are a combination of your skill set and your unique fit for the role. You have to think about what you can uniquely bring to that role, that team, that situation. It's not simply about paying your dues and being in the position long enough, or at least it shouldn't be if people are making the best hiring decisions. This is where I think networking becomes really powerful, because if you can build a brand around handling certain types of situations well, or having a specific skill set, then when someone sees a leadership opportunity that requires that skill set, they will think of you and help push you towards that role. That's actually how I got my current job. Okay, I thought I had a quiet spot. Even though it's more echoey, I figured it'd be better, and now they're out front. We're gonna make do. Sometimes you just gotta roll with it. So before this role, I was a senior manager of product management, and now I'm a director. And with this particular team, it was going to be rapidly growing. It's actually tripled in size since I joined a little over a year ago. With that rapid growth, there's naturally going to be issues with different personalities, getting people to work well together, scaling the operations of the team. Now, there were some people that my boss interviewed that are incredible at product management. He's even told me that of the people that he seriously considered, I was probably the weakest in that category. Doesn't mean I don't have skills in that category, but there are people that could do that part of the job better than me. But that's not what he needed in a leader. He needed someone that could take that really small release train and scale it to a much bigger one and still be very successful. He needed the skills to operationalize different processes that the company wanted to implement. He needed someone that could recognize opportunities in which the team as a whole needed to grow and change. He needed someone that could take the really passionate personalities that we have in the team that may not have traditionally gotten along as well as they could have, and help them work together. All of those other things outside of the pure product management are my bread and butter. That is exactly what I am known for within my community. So again, there was a combination of skill and unique fit. Now, once you get into one of these roles, something you need to accept is that you are not going to be universally seen as the perfect leader, okay? Not everyone's gonna like you. Where I really internalized this was actually in a leadership training a few years back. And during that training, we were all asked to describe the most influential leader on our careers. And really everyone ended up picking their favorite leader that they'd had. But I think every single person in the class kind of naturally said,
you know, this person was really great for my career, but a lot of other people hated them for like XYZ reason.
However, each of those leaders did something to make that individual feel uniquely supported, whether it be giving them really good feedback, supporting them personally, giving them opportunities that no one else would have given them. The person that I talked about in that training was actually the person who got me into product management. Without getting too deep into the details, he thrust a project my way that was really about building a product from scratch and getting it off the ground. There was writing a business case involved. We were going to be talking to different companies that could help us actually make it happen and all of this stuff. It was really my first foray into product management. And had he not done that, just kind of believed that I could do it and invested the time and energy into helping me figure it out, I probably wouldn't be in my job today. But to other people, that same leader was seen as chaotic and changing their mind all the time and frustrating to work with. But again, I would not have traded my time on his team for anything. I learned so much. And to this day, he's one of my favorite people that I ever worked for. So as you start getting into managing a team, you have to recognize that every individual is different, and therefore every individual has different needs from you as a leader. You need to understand how mature they are in their role and what type of support they need. There's a really interesting training that I took that talked about two primary leadership styles. One being directive, where you are very specific with what and how you want things done, and supportive, which is where you are letting the person that you are leading take the reins a lot more on how they go about doing whatever they're doing. The reason why using both is important is because individuals can kind of fluctuate in terms of where they're at with maturity in different parts of their job. So for example, if you have a fresh out of college grad who's like super excited about everything, but they don't really know what they're doing, they are going to take direction from you, specific direction, very well. And you also need to give that direction to them in order to make them successful. On the other hand, you might have a performer who is lower, who may not realize that they need that directive feedback and intervention, but you as a leader need to recognize that they need to change something in order to be successful, and you need to be specific in how you coach them to do that. Now, on the other side of that coin, you might have someone that is very mature in their role, knows exactly what they need to do, and really, you may just need to prompt them with questions to make sure that they've thought through an approach fully, but they're kind of good to go, and you can kind of let them do their own thing. And between those is a space where you have someone that you internally knows what they're doing, but they may not know how good they are and that they are okay to make some of those decisions more independently. And that's where a supportive approach comes in, where you might probe them again with those questions to say, well, how do you think you should approach that? And you could give them some feedback on it, but you're not laying out a specific path that they have to follow. They can create that path themselves. Now, the other important part of knowing the difference between what these people need is that if you use the wrong approach with the wrong type of person, you are going to cause them to fail. So think about that fresh out of college grad that has no idea what they're doing. If you just say, you'll figure it out, they might not. They really need to understand what it is that they're supposed to be doing in order to be successful. Otherwise, they're going to feel left out on an island, like they're not supported. Even if it's not specifically you giving them that path forward, you need to set them up with someone that can give them that path forward. On the other hand, if you have someone that is really strong in their role, knows what they're doing, knows that they are successful at it, and you lay out very specific steps that they need to follow, and they're like, girl, I know how to do my job, it's very condescending. They are going to interpret that as you not trusting them, and it will in turn make them not trust you. There's more nuance to your leadership style than saying I am very specific about what I tell people to do, or I let people kind of do whatever they want. You have to take an approach that is different for the individuals depending on the situation that they're in. And the same person that is hyper qualified and skilled in this one area could need a lot of heavy direction in this part of their job. And it's your job as a leader to recognize when they need each type of support. When I accepted my director role, one of my best friends at work, who was already a director, gave me some really good advice. She told me that I needed to understand when I had influence versus when I needed to kind of shut up and get on board. There are going to be a lot of times as a leader where you do have influence and control over your team and the ways that you work. But sometimes there are going to be decisions that were made way above you on implementing a certain process or policy. And it doesn't matter how much you fight it, it's not going to change the decision that was made. This is where you have to look for the positive in that change and figure out how to make the best of working within those constraints. And ideally, figure out some of those challenges before you have to communicate those changes to your team. You also have to figure out how honest you're going to be. I think it's okay to acknowledge some of the challenges that you're going to have with a particular decision. But again, you can't really outright say, I don't agree with this, because you don't want to be seen as the problem area in that organization, because that doesn't bode well for you or your career. Also, just in general, you probably have less control than everyone thinks. When you're in a leadership role, there's often a set of parameters that you're going to work in. So think like a box, and you can make any decisions within that box, but if you go outside of that box, it needs some sort of approval, or you may just not have control at all. So as an example, when raise season comes around, oftentimes what happens is managers are given a certain budget to work with, and they've got to use that budget appropriately across all of their team members. Giving someone a bigger raise might mean someone else gets a smaller raise. You don't often just get a bunch of money thrown your way that you can do whatever you want with. So if you're sitting there wondering,
why can't my boss give me that 10% raise that I think I deserve because I'm underpaid within the market?
That might be true, but in order for you to get that 10% raise, someone else's raise or two people's raises might have to literally drop to zero. And at that point, your manager is probably not willing to risk losing those team members who are going to be mad about getting no raise to give you the 10%. And also, there's probably restrictions on giving you that 10% unless there's a promotion involved. Now, often there's some negotiation that you can do with your peers or with your boss to help get budget from someone else's area to help make some of those bigger raises happen. And that can really help in certain situations. I know that in the past, I had a low performer on my team who I was going to give a lower raise to, and I knew that a peer of mine had someone that was severely underpaid but doing really good work, and we worked it out so that they used part of my budget in order to prop up that other person's raise. And also, as you're setting those raises, you have to think about not just their performance, but are they a flight risk, and how big of an impact would them leaving the company have on the team and the company itself. Raises in general are just a really interesting topic because you have to strike a balance of making people feel valued for their contribution and making sure that you are paying them as close to market rate as you can. But again, you also can't give them the world because there are restrictions. You have to stay within your little box. That's just reality. Promotions are also very interesting and often very weird. Every company works a little bit differently, but in general, inline promotions, which is where you are getting promoted within your current team, but you're getting a higher title. So say you are a normal product manager and you're getting promoted to be a senior product manager, but you're going to be working on the same type of work and staying within your same team. Those are not typically decisions that your manager can make in isolation. What I've seen from multiple companies and friends that I've spoken to in the industry, you typically have to recommend that person for promotion. Now here's where it gets interesting as a manager, okay? That individual has done great work throughout the year and they believe that they deserve it. It's on you as a manager to actually make the case for them to get promoted. Now, again, every company's exact process is different, but this could mean speaking about them in calibration sessions, writing up answers to very specific questions that HR wants to know, advocating for them to your boss. This could mean networking with your peers and telling them how great this person is, strategically putting them on projects where they get exposure to people outside of your specific organization so they know how great that person is. There's a lot of ways that you as a manager can influence that decision, but you are not the only person in control of it. Because typically there's only a certain number of promotions that can happen every year because of budget purposes and also because they don't want the organization becoming too top heavy. If everyone is a senior level and no one is a junior level, the pay is going to get really high relative to the work that's happening. And also you're not fostering any new talent. And so what could happen is you could see at some point roles getting eliminated that are at higher levels and a push to have more lower level people come into the organization. So typically it's better to have kind of the overall organization be more balanced so that you have a nice upward trajectory for people. But again, it may not be at the pace that a particular person wants. One thing that I also personally do as a leader is I always look out for who I think could be a good promotion candidate. I don't like to go into a promotion cycle without recommending anyone. So even if I think it's a little bit early for someone, I would rather get their name out there and in the ecosystem where people are talking about them, even if it means that they don't get the promotion during that particular cycle. It helps build the name recognition for whoever I'm nominating and makes it easier for those future cycles where I think I've got a better case to actually make it happen. And honestly, if you see teams where people are consistently getting promoted, that's probably what the managers are doing. Don't hate the player, hate the game. Delivering feedback is part of the job. And feedback has to be both positive and constructive. That constructive doesn't have to mean negative. It's all in how you deliver it. Now, sometimes feedback is going to be taken negatively no matter what you do, but there are things you can do to have that constructive criticism come off as both authentic and like you want to see them succeed. So when it comes to constructive feedback, it's always best to do it either in person or over video chat if possible. I would say from there, go to phone calls. The last way that I would err on doing it is over written communication unless you've established a lot of trust with that person already, just because it's a lot easier to misconstrue tone when it's just typed text. A lot of people will advocate for a compliment sandwich approach where you give someone a compliment, give them some constructive criticism, and then add another compliment. Well, I think that can work in some situations when it's feedback that you know is going to like hit them in the feels. I do it a little bit differently. First, I try to ask them for their perspective on the situation and how they thought it went. They may already be seeing the change that needs to be made, and you can either reaffirm that or redirect it depending on their answer. Now, if their perception is very different than yours, that's when you can say, this is what I'm noticing that you may not see, or when you took this action, I think you intended X, but the impact was actually Y. This becomes really challenging when it's more of a soft skills issue as opposed to like how a PowerPoint slide is laid out, because it can get into someone's personality and how they are perceived, which is not as black and white. But it's also really important for the person to hear some of that feedback, because if you aren't going to be honest and tell them what the impact is of their actions, then they don't have it in their control to really change it. And at that point, it's really their choice as to whether or not they want to accept that feedback. One of the most important things with these conversations is that you have them as close to when the issue happens as possible. So if there was an issue with the way something was presented in a meeting, try to catch them either soon after the presentation happened, the next day, or, at most, catch them in their next one-on-one. But ideally, talk to them while it's still fresh in their minds so that they can remember the context of the interaction as well as what the impact was that they noticed about, again, whatever the situation may be. Also, I always try to reiterate that I want to see the person succeed and that I know that they can make the change that I'm asking for. One thing that's frustrating to me as a manager is seeing another manager put off giving an employee serious, important feedback that would turn around their performance. Instead, what often happens is they will hold off on giving a not so great mid-year or end-of-year rating to kind of spare the person's feelings because they're giving them a chance. And what happens is the person doesn't hear the feedback that they need to change until the point where in the manager's head, they're too far gone and they kind of want to see the person off their team. In their mind, I think they are giving that employee a chance, but I think in reality, they're not. Because by the time you allow your brain to get to the point where you're saying this is a lost cause, but the employee hasn't seen that feedback in writing, they haven't had a chance to grasp the seriousness of it, because you as a manager haven't had the courage to have that serious conversation with them, you haven't given them a chance to change. You're not giving them a chance to succeed. So you have to have the hard conversations in order for that person to be given a chance to be successful. And you also have to figure out navigating your company's unique HR policies and rating systems, because every company is different. Every leader is different with how they interpret those official ratings. But regardless of those systems, the absolute minimum that you have to do as a manager is give the constructive feedback that that employee requires in order to set them up for success. Now, the flip side of feedback is giving good feedback, right? And recognition of when people do well. And this is just as important as that constructive feedback, because this is what signals to your team that you want to see more of what they are doing well. It also lets you signal to those around you that, hey, this person is doing really well. And again, by the time promotions come around, or you're recommending people for a higher than normal raise, you will have more of a justification for doing so. Verbal positive feedback is great. Written feedback is even better in some cases, because again, you have a paper trail that you can reference for helping that person out in their career. I will say it's also helpful to keep a paper trail of constructive feedback. And this could be things like email recaps of one-on-ones where you had to deliver difficult feedback, or you were asking for specific actions to be done. And this is because that's the type of thing that HR is going to ask you if you are in a position where you have to put someone on a performance improvement plan. Because if there's any sort of legal action that would need to happen in the long run, you have a paper trail that shows why the person ended up on a performance improvement plan. So one thing that'll also make you look really good as a people leader is being an exporter of talent inside of your organization. Now, what I mean by that is you take the people on your team, you grow them and level them up, whether that's with a promotion or just with the skills that they've developed, including their soft skills. And you help that individual find other opportunities within the organization. Now, this does a couple of things. It spreads knowledge internally in the organization. Like, I can't tell you how valuable it is to have random knowledge of something over here when you're working over here, because you're going to think about a solution differently than someone that doesn't have that insight. You also become a destination within the organization for people that want to grow their career. So people will say, anyone that kind of goes into your organization, exits with a promotion, they might say,
I really want to work for Nikki because I know that I'll grow a lot in her organization.
And that's really good for you as a leader. It means you get people that actually want to be there, that are going to work hard to improve their skill set. And I think that's a really fun dynamic as a leader. As a leader, you set an example, good or bad. So if you are losing your temper in meetings, if you're short with people, if you gossip, you are setting the expectation that that is acceptable and potentially even encouraged within your team. Now, on the flip side, if you are kind, if you are patient, if you demand respect, if you give someone grace when they mess up, those become the expectations of your team. So it's really important that you demonstrate the behavior that you want to see in your team. There's also specific actions that I like to take as a leader to set the cultural tone of the team. I don't want my team feeling like they have to work on vacation or even check messages. So when I go on vacation, I unplug completely, but my team knows that they have my cell phone if there is a true emergency. In the last year, that has only happened one time, and I already kind of knew it was coming because of some things that happened before I went on vacation. Prioritizing your family just in general, I think, is really important as a leader. And I'll give an example. My boss coaches his kids' sports teams, and that requires him to leave the office earlier on our in-office days in order to do that. I'm just very comforted to know that when I need to kind of draw those lines for my family in ways that work for me, I know that I will be supported in doing so because I see my boss demonstrating that. And so I try to do the same thing for my team. Another really simple one here is either working from home or taking the day off when your kid is sick, whatever makes sense for you. Yes, it's not ideal to have a kid kind of coming into frame to ask a question when you're on a call, but at the end of the day, you are showing that family comes first. And I think that's really important. If you're coming into a leadership role, I highly recommend that you identify someone who can be an outlet for you to talk about whatever the tough situations are going on at work. Tough situations are going to arise, and you're going to wonder if you did the right thing. While venting to people that know the situation may feel good in the moment, it does bring in negative energy to the team, and you need to be wary of that. Someone external to the situation can validate your feelings while also helping you see a different perspective. They also might help you put that problem-solving hat on instead of just being like, yeah, that girl really is annoying, or yeah, that guy made a terrible decision, whatever the situation is. Like, it's okay to think those things internally, just don't say them out loud. Save that stuff for chatting with your spouse late at night or with a friend over dinner when no coworkers are anywhere near you. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and tell me in the comments what other topics you wish I had covered, because there's so many things I could talk about in this space. Now, one video that I have done is how to survive working from home with a toddler, because that is not easy. And that video is right here. So go check it out.